Because around most of the world, and I know this because I travel all the time, and the culture I'm from, all of this stuff is really obvious. And it's always been obvious. For thousands and thousands of years, people have done it for a reason, right? And now we have the option to, it's funny, we have the luxury of even having the option to like pontificate about these ideas and to think, maybe we should rethink this whole thing. Maybe, you know what, maybe there aren't even men and women. Maybe we need to rethink the entire, right? Like around the world, they're not having this conversation in China, in Japan, in Africa, across the Middle East, like in South America. They're not having this conversation of how many genders are there and pronouns and do men actually need women? Do women actually need men? They're just like, all of this stuff is goofy. They're like, what are you guys even talking about?
What do they think about us? Yeah, I mean.
Man, I've been,
what do they do instead? That's
what do they do instead? Well, it's interesting. I mean, just in the past 6 months, I mean, I've been to UAE, I've been to Qatar, I've been to South Africa, I've been to Nigeria, I've been to Malaysia, I've been to Thailand. And when I do talk to people about some of this stuff, people who are from there, there's a big level of disbelief. Like, people don't even believe some of the things. They're just like, what? Like, what? I mean, did you guys see the Matt Walsh documentary, What is a Woman? Mm-hmm. And you know, when he goes to the tribe in Kenya, and he's even just trying to explain the concept, and they're just like, what are you?
The translation. He's like, lost in translation. He's like, yeah, me too. I am too.
It's confusing, right? I mean, I had this viral tweet back in 2019. I'm sure you saw, you know, where I identified as a woman and I broke the British women's deadlift record. And to people in the UK and US and Canada and Australia, it was hilarious. To some people in many parts of the world, they were like, I don't get it. They're like, what do you mean you identified as a woman? What does that even mean? They're like, you're a man. Like, so the humor didn't even land with some people because they're like, I don't even get what this means. What do you mean? Like, no one is saying that men are the same as women. What is identifying as a woman? You have to even have the cultural context to explain that. If I showed you that tweet in 2005, you probably wouldn't have understood it. Oh yeah. Right? You would have been like, what's the context for this? What does this even mean? So this kind of shows just how unmoored we've become from reality itself. And I think that when you forget all of these basics, or when you act like they don't exist, or you delude yourself to believe they don't exist, you always get problems, because biologically we're the same as our ancestors, right? We have the same. We're in a new context and we have new technology, but we have the same fundamental needs and desires. And, you know, you've got the sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You've got the basic stuff at the bottom, you know, food, shelter, water, and so on. But then higher up, you have things that people want. You know, people want attention. People do want love. People do want a relationship. People want, you know, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, and all of these things. And, you know, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, you can still get and do all of these things in the traditional way that it's been done for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. And in my observation, the people who tend to opt more for that route, at least in part, do tend to be happier and more content. And there's even studies showing that. If you're someone who wants to take a different, you know, totally different approach and try to sort of reinvent the wheel, you can, and it'll work for some people. But the truth is, we shouldn't base everything on exceptions. We should always accommodate exceptions within reason. But just because someone knows some guy or some woman who's 60 years old and never got married and never had kids and whatever, and they're totally happy and they're healthy, right? That's not the norm. I know those people exist, but if you were to say that that's the thing to aspire to, or that's the thing that's going to make most people happy, then you're doing a big disservice to people. You just end up with a lot of people who several decades from now, they're miserable and they're angry and they feel like they got lied to and they were sold, you know, they were psyoped into this life of loneliness. And now those doors have closed. And I think that's a shame. So, you know, I think we've lost balance. You know, you used a term I use a lot. You talked overcorrection. I think we're in the age of overcorrection on so many different issues. And it just needs to be brought back to that point of sanity. And I think it would help if people also just take a more mature approach with it. Because whenever you even talk about these things, like, we can do this long form in this type of conversation in person, and it helps. If I attempt this conversation on social media, I immediately will have, so you're saying women should be forced into the kitchen, and you're saying women should be forced to do that. I'm like, when did I say? When have I said any of this? Right? I've never said anything about forcing this or forcing that or whatever. We're just trying to have a conversation about actually, okay, let's go back to the basics. We could go really back to the basics on a lot of this stuff. You could go around and interview 1 million 25-year-old women or 20-year-old women, 1 million 25-year-old men, and say, okay, you know, what do you want in life? What are your goals? What are your aspirations? What are the things that concern you? What are the things you find out what they say? And I bet you're going to get pretty standard responses if people are being honest